are presenting today another in the series of the Academic Job Search series. And today we're talking about the academic interviews. We're welcoming a panel of 4 UConn faculty, 2 of whom are going to give you the perspective of the search committee. Having been served on search committees, maybe led search committees, they're going to give you an opportunity to kind of get the inside scoop. They're going to give you all the secrets, the secret sauce. They're going to give you all they know so that you can be successful in that endeavor. We're also going to hear from 2 faculty members who are relatively new to the hiring process or who have just recently gone through the academic interview process, and will share what it's like from their perspective, maybe not 10,000 feet out, but maybe 1,000 feet out, saying, what advice would they give to you?
Sure. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been a long time since I was in your stage. It's kind of scary to think about how long ago it was when I was in your stage. But what that means is that I've been on the opposite side for a long time, and so I have participated in a lot of searches over the last 25 or more years here at the University of Connecticut. So I'll try to give you some tips from that perspective, but because it's been a long time since I've been in your shoes, I'm not sure exactly what the most useful things for you are, so please feel free. I assume at the end we'll have a question-answer. Okay, or if I say something that you'd like to interrupt me, feel free to do that. But let me just make some introductory comments, and then we'll go from there. So we were asked, or I was asked, along with Nora, from our perspective, to talk a little bit about typical steps in forming a search committee or a hiring committee. And the one thing I want to point out here is that it's usually the case that the person who chairs the search committee for the position for which you will apply is someone in your field. But the important thing is that other people on the committee may or may not be in your field, and even the chair may or may not be working on things closely related to what you are working on. And so it's important to recognize that the composition of the search committee is such that when you meet with them and talk with them, you're going to want to be addressing kind of 2 audiences, if you will. One is an audience of people who maybe know a lot about the area that you work in, and the other is an audience of people who don't necessarily know very much about what you work in. And that's important because you need to connect with both of those. So you need to be able to talk about your work both in general terms that someone who's not an expert would understand, as well as in specific terms so someone who is more of an expert can see that you also are an expert in that field. So I guess that would be my main point that I would want to convey about search committees. I think that's important to keep in mind and when you're preparing. Are there commonalities to search committees? The answer to that is probably no. There are, usually committees will be anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6 people. When you do your actual interview, it may be with a single individual. It may be with a subset of the search committee, 1 or 2 people. It may be with the full search committee. So again, that will vary depending upon the particular discipline as well as people's schedules. Sometimes it's simply a case that some people can't make it who otherwise would participate. I don't know how it works in other fields, but in economics, the interview process is 2-stage. We have a scholarly meeting that's held once a year, usually in January, where there are initial interviews that are relatively short, maybe a half-an-hour interview, and their search committee is interviewing a large number of people, so back-to-back-to-back-to-back interviews, half an hour, half hour, half hour, half hour. In that process, your goal is to stand out enough to be invited to do a full interview on campus, because that's the 2nd stage. Now, I know some disciplines don't have that 1st stage, and they go directly to the 2nd stage, and I don't know, and maybe Nora will speak a little bit about that. But in the case of economics, at least, and other disciplines like it, the key is during that 1 half an hour, that's your short time period that you have to engage the committee and impress on the committee that you're a candidate that they should potentially be very interested in and that they should want to bring to campus for a fuller, more detailed, longer interview. one of the questions that Victoria asked is whether there are often asked questions that you should prepare for in advance. And the answer to that is yes and no. There are some kind of standard things that you can expect. I think we always ask, about research. We always ask about teaching. And when we ask about research and teaching, we always ask about it in the kind of past, present, and future. So what is it that you've done already? What are you currently doing? And where do you see yourself going? And what would you like to do in the next, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or whatever? So on both the teaching and the research side, you should be prepared to speak about what you've done in the past, what you're currently engaged in, and what you hope to do moving forward. And again, we can talk more details about that if you'd like. I pulled here a sheet that says good interview questions for faculty. That I can't remember where I got this. It came from an HR department somewhere. And quite honestly, for most junior faculty, most of these questions are irrelevant. You will not be asked them. I know, or at least I'd be very surprised if you were. I don't know what your list has on it, but some of the questions that are typical in non-academic interviews or non-junior faculty interviews are on this list. For instance, describe a situation where you've had trouble with a colleague and what did you do about it? They're not going to ask you that, most likely, in an academic job interview, because your job is not about managing other people. It's about doing research and teaching. So they might ask you about dealing with a student or a situation with a student, but they're unlikely to ask you about dealing with difficult colleagues, for example. So on this list, what I did is highlight the questions that I think are most relevant for junior faculty, and as you can see, it's a relatively smaller list than the original, focused on teaching and research. So, we can go into, again, more detail afterwards, but those would be the kinds of things I would point to. I don't want to take too much time here, so let me just move to do's and don'ts. I think that was the other big thing you wanted us to talk about. So, I think there are important do's and don'ts. So, my first do would be that it's super important to be as prepared for your interview as you possibly can. There's nothing worse than interviewing a candidate who doesn't know things that you think they should know about your department, obvious things that are easily learned from the web. Like, where is Storrs, Connecticut, by the way? Or something like that. Or asking, so do you have a PhD program and a master's program? Well, that's information you can get off the web, and you should get as much information off of the web as you possibly can. You should also learn as much about the faculty in the department that you're interviewing with as you can, because the more you can show that you've prepared, it shows your level of interest. It also gives you something to talk about during your interview, which is a good thing, because my second major do is that you want during the interview to engage in a conversation with the people who are interviewing you. So you want to make eye contact. You don't want to be sitting there talking like this and as though you're not engaged with them. You want to make eye contact. You want to have a conversation with the people who are interviewing you that is a two-way conversation that conveys to them that you are an engaged scholar who, whether it's a teaching position or a research position, either way, who's interested in knowledge and learning and all those kinds of things. So it can be a two-way conversation where you convey things about yourself, but you also ask questions about that department or the faculty, and that's something that you can do better if you are better prepared. So, my second point, as I say, is to try to make the interview a conversation rather than a one-way you tell them something or they tell you something. And the interview process will reveal both positively and negatively things that are not easily gleaned from a resume or a CV. So, sometimes you read a CV and say, this person looks great, and you go to the interview and, or you say, this person, not so great, but we'll give them a chance. You go to the interview, great, this person was really strong. What makes the difference? A lot of it is how that person engages in the discussion that you have during that interview process. So that is a very critical part of, I think, being able to kind of move forward in the interview process and ultimately get a job, an academic job. The third do, I guess I would say, is that obviously part of being prepared is not only knowing that department, but knowing your own work as well as possible, and you want to defend your work. You might be in a situation where somebody challenges you about your work, and you want to defend your work, but not be defensive about your work. Because what you want to do is you want to convey to that person that you've thought about issues, and you're an expert in this field, but that doesn't mean you know everything or you have thought about everything. So if somebody does raise a challenge or raises a new issue, you should be open to saying, you know, that's a really good point, and I need to go back and think about that, or I need to go back and do some more research on that, or whatever. So I would urge you to, be the expert in your field, but not be the know-it-all in your field. There's a big difference there. Okay, so those are my do's. My don'ts. One is, do not ask, what does it take to get tenure? When somebody asks that during a job interview, I throw their application in the garbage, because to me that's a red flag. That means I'm in this to get tenure, as opposed to I'm in this because I'm an interested scholar, academic, etc. So I don't know, maybe my colleagues would give different advice, but I would say do not ask in your interview process what it takes to get tenure. I would say be prepared, but don't recite things. So you don't want to go in there and be on autopilot. Here's my spiel, and I'm giving it to you, and if you ask me to veer from it, I'm in trouble. So you don't want to just recite. You want to be well prepared, but again, it's this idea of having a conversation. And then the third, I guess I would say is, and all of this, again, is part of what I've already said, is don't try to fake knowledge. So if somebody asks you a question and you have no idea, rather than trying to kind of wing it or whatever, you're probably better off saying, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure. Here's how I might think about that, but I obviously need to give it more thought. And you can always turn things back to the interviewer and say, can you suggest someplace I might look or read or whatever more about that? So you don't want to try to bluff your way through by claiming that you know things that you really don't, because they're likely to see through that, particularly if there's someone in your field who's part of the process. And they will, again, that's a real negative if somebody thinks, that person really didn't know what they were talking about. They were just trying to kind of cover what they could. So I think it's perfectly okay to acknowledge that you don't know everything and to ask questions of the interviewers and learn from. So the interview process can be two things. They learn about you, you learn about them, but you also learn about your own research area, because oftentimes they might have suggestions for you or comments on your research that, aside from anything related to getting a job from that place, will be very useful to you in your future research. So you should use it as an opportunity, even if you're not going to, even if you think, oh, this is, I really don't want to go to this particular place, I'll never take a job from this place. Still, you might learn from the interview process some things for your own research that you can take back and incorporate, even if that job never materializes for you. So those would be my comments.
Channeled my thoughts, and so some of the things are going to be different than what Kathy has said, and so you get whatever you would like to take. But how do we form and charge a search committee? So the formation of the search committee usually has to be broad and has to include minorities. Okay, so we have to have a composition that has junior and senior faculty as well as women and minorities, because we never know who are the candidates going to be, and we want to make sure that equal opportunity for everyone. Then the charge is we want to have the best candidate, independently from whether it is a minority or independent of gender. So those are very important things. I've gotten through at least 3 or 4 interviews, one to get a postdoc. So I'm in physics, and in physics, after your PhD, you have to do a postdoc, which can be between 2 and 4 years. And so I was a postdoc, then I was an assistant scientist at a national lab, and then I had the interview for the assistant professor position, and then I also interviewed last year to be head of the physics department. So the interviews have similarities, but you can see that they're each a little different, right? You go from a really junior to a more senior, but they all are fundamental. have certainly seen the fundamental character and the core that they have, basically. So the commonality is one of the questions. It varies between 6 and 10 person, 10 when it's very senior, 1 to 2 to 4 when it's junior, depending upon what you'd be doing. And I'm assuming that we have a little bit of everything. I've spotted at least one physics person, but we have a little bit of every areas, and all areas are different. So we want to make the pool as diverse as possible, and UConn and most institutions must be equal opportunity employers, period. So how does the interview goes? In the hard sciences, it starts with first a Skype. Once your folder has been selected and not be tossed into the bin, as we've heard, you have a Skype interview. And the Skype interview can be vary from 5 minutes. If you turn off the committee, then they're basically going to say, okay, thank you, bye. Then you know you're not going to be called. And it could extend to half an hour. And so the Skype interview is what's going to then make you a potential to be asked to visit the institution for an interview. So you want to basically pass this Skype interview. And so the Skype interview is just exactly the same as if you were in person, except that you are not presenting your work, right? But everything else is the same. So what are the most frequently asked questions? So you need to know that what the place that wants to hire you want to know is, one, are you competent? Okay? And they're not going to basically say, are you competent? Because you're going to say, yes, of course I'm competent, right? So it's through a variety of questions that we are going to try to infer whether you really are competent. You sent your CV, it's written black and white, but we don't really know if you have done the work, right? So we need to try to achieve that. Two, which is also very important, is that are you a teamwork person, right? And of course, if we ask you that question, we say, oh yeah, I work just one in teams, but you know, we need to have proof, and this is going to be done through the Skype and in-person interview. Then, do you have good interpersonal skills, from good to very good? If you don't have any, that's a bad problem, even if you are very competent. And then, are you a friendly person? So, you know, friendly and good to very good interpersonal skills, you know, can be one. But all of these three are very important, because you can have a very important person who is a pain. And even if, you know, that you are hired as a faculty, in fact, you cannot make the interview process if you display a variety of attributes that would tell us that you can't work with people, even if it's on PTR committee, because we have a lot of committee work in any department. We teach, we do research, we do services to the university. We are here for that. That's a service that we're doing to the university, having this, but also to the physics department. And to do that, you, in fact, interact with the faculty. So although you don't work with the faculty directly, in the sciences, in the hard sciences, often you actually have large teamwork. It could vary from 100 people to 3 people. But rarely are you going to be working just by yourself, right? And you have to be a team player. So we all have to strive to do all of these 4 things. Interpersonal skills, and usually in physics we don't have them, so we have to work hard at it, right? We're sort of wolves. We want to be left alone, and it's just how our brain is wired. We're not as good as the people in the humanities, and it just is. Isn't that true? Right? We know that. At least I admit it.
It's like a secret handshake.
Right. But I had to work at it myself, because I just had to work at it throughout my whole career. Right? I started out to be very shy, wanting to be left alone, to having to be a little more extroverted, share, talk, and also interact with my colleagues. And we all can learn all of these things. So through the interview, you're going to be asked questions. And so what they really want to find out is, how competent are you? But they're not going to say, how competent are you? Basically, they're going to say, what have you done specifically during your project, right? So the questions are going to be sort of differently. What has been your contribution in this paper? So you've listed a CV, and you're not first author, you're not last author. Usually the last author in the sciences is the main PI. if you're the first author, it's your thesis, it's your paper, but you could also be, because in, again, the sciences, work in a group within your team members. You could be second or third or even fourth. And so what does it mean to be fourth author? And so they say, well, in this paper, which sounds very interesting, what was your contribution? And then they'll ask you about, in this other paper that you've listed, did you design the project? Did you carry it out? Because there's a lot of things. You could design a project. Somebody else is going to carry it out. You could have taken part in carrying out the project. There are many steps to any project. And that's true for anything, I mean, any areas. And they would want to have basically details from what you wrote on your CV by engaging you in a conversation, right? But really the bottom line is trying to find out if you're really competent as you pretend to be in writing. Then the second one is they would want to know what has attracted you to the job. Does this place pay a lot? That's certainly not the answer, right? It may be that you're applying at this place because the salary range is good, or because it's close to New York City where you could go and have fun, or because your girlfriend is in Boston, or, you know, that is not a good answer. So they would want you to answer the question. Oh, that's because I love this place, because it has this, that, and the other. And this, that, and the other has to be the department composition scholarship, or if it's teaching, or, right? So it has to be related to the workplace that this particular institution has, which I corroborate with what Kathy said. You must do your homework about each place that you are going to interview. It's a lot of work, but this is what's going to make you stand out from the crowd of all the others who are applying for the same job you are applying. Every single place, you Google them, and with the age of Google, it's really easy. Google them and find out. All of the members of the department, who are they? Or if it's industry, same thing, right? Who are the people who are in this industry? What are they doing? Who does what? And so you need to familiarize yourself with their name and what they're doing. You can't do it for everybody. Like I had to do it for this headship, right? And I only knew 3 people for the whole department that has 45 people, right? So it's a lot. I did it to all, but I just had to just try to learn as much as what some faculty were doing. I couldn't obviously know everything and remember everything, right? But you got to do your homework, right? Also, what they want to know is, have you done those homework? And they'll sort of ask you questions which would not be so obvious, but they will reveal whether you bothered going into that website and finding out what this place is all about, right? Let's say, how many students are there at UConn, right? It varies from 10 to 30,000. If you say, oh yeah, if you gave the wrong number, that's really bad too. It's just, some generality and some specificities. But basically it means you've got to be prepared. So I'm anchoring what Kathy is saying. But prepared not just about your stuff, your thesis, but the global picture. You have to have an oversight of the whole institution you're going to, right? And then the college you're going to, then the department you're going to. And yes, it is time consuming, but just start early, that's all. Then, that actually was very good, the questions that you've sent us, those are really excellent. The other thing that we were asked to think about telling you is what are the questions that they're trying to glean from without telling you specifically. And so one of them is they would want to try to know if you are a team player, but they're not going to say you're a team player. They're going to say, how do you like to work usually? Oh, I like to work all by myself. Bad answer, right? Bad answer. Because even as I said, as a faculty, we're collaborating. So here I came, and I'm collaborating with people in the physics department, but also with the chemistry department, because it's a lot about interdisciplinary and reaching out. So the university is a big thing. There are colleges, many colleges, there are many departments, and the best thing is for us to interact. And so synergy is key, it's very important. And if you don't like doing it, start thinking about how much you can benefit from it. You can benefit from it. It's not just benefiting the institution, but you are benefiting from it. So they would want to know if you're a team player. Then we would want to try to find if you have potential, right? Your CV may not be glowing. You may not have been at MIT or Harvard, one of those flashy, known university, but you have tremendous potential. Well, you will have an opportunity to talk about that potential, but they're not going to say, do you have potential? They'll say, what kind of initiatives have you taken in the past? And would you be interested in something else that they will talk to you about? Like, we have X who's working on, photosynthesis. That's biology, and I'm in physics. Would you be interested in maybe discussing with them and finding some collaborations? And so you want to be prepared to say, although I don't know anything about biology since I am whatever, I would love to sit with them, talk with them, find out how I can contribute, right? That shows, of course you have to mean it, you have to be sincere. And so try to prepare yourself that you're going from a student where this is my project, this is what I'm doing, to going to the rest of the world and wanting to see that it's actually interesting to do that, right? I have my own research program, but I also collaborate with others. So you could do a variety of things. And then the last one is, they would want to know if you're a fast learner. And this is perhaps mostly for those who are going to go in industry, right? If you're in academic where you have your own research and you're going to be teaching, but as we all know, right, Kathy, we started out teaching writing on the blackboard, and now it's the era of, right, clickers, and there's some professors who don't really want to teach the most innovative way. And so some of you are in classroom where you do experience the innovations, right? And there are some who do not, because some faculty don't want to do it. So what we want to know is, are you flexible enough? Do you like to learn? And are you a fast learner? So the do's and the don'ts. You have to work at being confident. And if you're not, then you have to start early in working at being confident. Chances are you are all very competent. You know your stuff. But some of you may lack confidence in yourself. So you got to work at not having it and certainly not displaying it, right? And so you just have to work at it. And by working is practicing. You practice with your buddies and your friends. You talk with them. You prepare your presentation. You present it in front of them. And it's just how your demeanor, right? So you got to work at being relaxed and composed. You have to prepare and prepare and prepare, as Kathy said. This is key. You got to prepare for the discussion with all of the interviewers, and then you have to prepare for your presentation. Your presentation, as Kathy said, should not be like just regurgitating. It has to flow, it has to be interesting, you have to come out liking what you're doing and excited about what you're doing. But you should prepare so that you don't go, you know what I mean, or those things that we say often, like, as I just said it now, right? You got to prepare yourself so as to not say it that often, all of these things, or try to take those out. And so it's like practicing. Practice many times. Your delivery, and again, I corroborate with Kathy, must be clear, concise, and this is why if you prepare your presentation, you're not going to be repetitive, you're not going to be looking for your words and searching for your words. And for those of us who are not native speakers, it's harder, right? To just give the delivery and find the exact words that we really wanted to use, and it's not coming out to us as the natives can do. So we have to work at it. It takes more time, but that's okay. We can do it, right? I mean, I'm head of a department. I was a foreign citizen. I'm an American now, but, I still have an accent, but that's okay. I try to do my best, and we just have to always try. The third thing is the dress. No sneakers during interview. No sneakers. Okay, just by your.
Laugh, but I bet you've seen.
We have seen sneakers. We have seen flip-flops. Yes, flip-flops.
So this is a big conversation actually among the scientists because
yes.
Particularly in the wet labs, you all spend a lot of time in jeans and T-shirts. You go to your conferences in jeans and T-shirts.
And flip-flops.
Right, but you can't do that at an interview. It doesn't translate. It just looks like slop.
It's sloppy, exactly. And there was a graduate student who was going to get a job who gave an invited presentation in flip-flops and jeans. Come on, I'm sure if he came with sneakers, that's okay. But flip-flops, No, no, no. So I tell my students, about the dress code. You don't have to be super fancy dressed. Just pair of shoes, whatever. And they even make those sneakers that are not bulky. They're sort of neutral, right? Pair of pants, no jeans, and a shirt. Or not a T-shirt that has, a bunch of things written, right? Just leave that for going to the work. So also, you should not dress excessively like suits. It's a bit much, like a whole suit and a tie. It's a bit much. But if you have a jacket, that's fine. But not overly one way or the other. And for the ladies, please, no huge makeup and, some elaborate hairdo. That also, it just attracts the wrong impression. You just want to be neutral, basically. I mean, some makeup is okay, but just not too much of it. Now, mistakes to avoid, don't speak too fast and don't speak too slowly. If you speak too fast, then you give the impression that you're an intense, nervous person, and they can't understand what you're saying anyway, right? And if you speak too slowly, like every 2 or 3 words you pause, it's a little difficult, right? The other one, don't drink too much when they take you out to dinner. If at the end of the day you like to have 3 beers to relax, don't do it. Even if they are doing it, don't do it, because you may be saying things that you don't intend to say or you wouldn't have, right? And then they see this other side of you. Not a good idea. Just, have a drink, but limit it to that. And then they're going to try to find out from the interpersonal skills, and that is, they want to know if you're too aggressive, right? Or if you're too distant. You want to be in the middle. If you are shy and you tend to, that's okay, we're all the way we are, right? But at least make an effort to converse. If people ask you a question, don't answer yes or no. They're trying to get to know you and see if you can be their colleagues, right? We have plenty of colleagues who are, private, and that's okay. But there's a difference between being distant in a way that shows that you're, one of those loners that are difficult to work with, right? And so you just, again, some of us are loners, we like to do that, but you are working in an environment and they want to make sure that you can work with everybody. How much does the interview make or break the job? I would say it's 100%, right? Because this is, if you are competent, but your interpersonal skills or whatever it is that comes out of your personality is not something, then people are not going to want to have you because you're not going to fit in, right? We all have to be social at a certain level, not extremely social, but we have to interact. If somebody has to walk on eggshell to ask you if you could serve on a committee, it's difficult. So just common sense.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I think John and I are going to speak to more recent experiences, and I think that's kind of where I wanted to start with. I went to my Career Center, and I went through the series of workshops, and they have the timeline where, okay, you can submit your application sometime September through October, and I'm in the humanities, right? Or September through November, maybe a little bit in December. You might expect your first job talk in mid-February. And that year, I got requested to do a job talk in late November. Mm. So I just wanted to say that you have to take those timelines with a grain of salt because things are changing, and at least in my discipline, some departments are really advancing the timeline in an effort to kind of poach candidates earlier than other universities. And also, in my discipline, we used to do a lot of conference interviews at our national organizations conference, which is the Modern Language Association. And I think a lot of other disciplines do conference interviews, but that's also shifting with Skype, so that less and less we're seeing conference interviews as your first interview and seeing more phone interviews and Skype interviews. So I think these things are changing. I feel like there is also more turnover in academics now, and so when I sort of started my job search, I assumed that I would be going up against other recent graduates or people who are finishing their degrees. But in some of the kind of job talks or late-stage interviews that I did, I was actually up against, in one case, I was up against a tenured professor. In another, I was competing against people that already had jobs as assistant professors. And so that's not to discourage you or to make you feel like, eek, right? But to sort of be aware that the market is shifting and that it's, at least in the humanities, a very glutted market. And so so you have to be aware of that landscape. And I should also say that I worked in industry as an HR person in the tech industry before I went back to academics, and so I've actually done thousands of interviews, mostly with tech people, so I feel like I can speak to the tech people in the room as well. And for senior positions and straight out of college positions, I've looked at a lot of resumes and CVs. I've been on not a search committee for a professor, but for sort of other in-house departmental stuff or for academics. And my general advice there is to avoid the whiff of desperation. Even though the job market can be really tough in certain disciplines, you don't want to have that sort of air about you, because when you get so invested in a position or you want things to happen in a certain way, that can read across to committees, and that's not particularly attractive, right? You want to sort of put your best foot forward, to be very genuine. But also to realize that search committees are often looking for, my brother and I call this the mythical unicorn. So oftentimes committees, each person has their own thing that they're looking for, and sometimes you'll read descriptions, the less well-crafted descriptions that seem like they're asking for everything, right? And there's no possible way that you could fulfill all of those things well. And so that's not to say you should go and try to bone up on all of those areas to be that mythical unicorn, but that you should just embrace what you are good at that sort of applies to that description and be confident about that. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from a search committee person actually was that the unfortunate thing is that sometimes you're competing against your closest friends and colleagues. The way that it works, you kind of end up in a subfield, and you know these people, and they're all people that work on similar things, and then you end up competing for positions against these people. And so it's a relief when everybody finally gets placed and you can go back to being colleagues, right? So it's not to see it as obviously you want to continue to have collegial relations with those people, even though you might be in competition with them. Eventually they will also be your colleagues at other institutions, right? So it's just be nice to everybody every step of the way, right? And my advisor, I had a very close relationship with, and his advice was always it was three things: enthusiasm, enthusiasm, enthusiasm. And so it was, sometimes you could just get very stressed out. It's a very stressful experience, and you probably have lots of other things going on in your lives, and it's easy to get very downtrodden. And I think, but what a search committee really wants to see is that you have upbeat energy, that you will bring sort of new life to the department and potentially new directions, and also that you're excited about your research. And I'm sure you are all excited about your research somewhere deep within, even if it doesn't show on a daily basis. And to sort of rediscover that and tap into that again is something that you need to bring and instill in the committee. It's like if you were teaching, right? The same kind of attitude you want to have with your students to empower them and to also excite them about what you do is sort of the approach you need to take with even more senior colleagues. And to practice. I feel like I'm saying the same things, but use conferences. I don't know if it's the same in the sciences, but use conferences to practice your presentations. For me, and I think I've done 7 or 8 job talks at very different universities, large ones, small ones, private, public. And I think you have to know your audience, so you need to know what part of your dissertation or what part of your research you're picking for that audience. And I did really badly for my first few of them because I didn't gauge my audience well, and I did better sort of after that. Also knowing your personal tics, so I think you were saying when you look down, so I tend to be very shy and abashed too, and have had to become more extroverted, and I have these glasses that don't fit really well, and so I remember I did a mock job talk, and one of my professors, the only comment was, fix your glasses, right? Because well, I mean, it's kind of like an Asian nose bridge thing, but they're always sliding down, right? So it's like, get them tightened. Okay, it seems stupid, right? But it just looks very awkward if you're constantly adjusting your glasses during your talk, right? So be aware of those nervous tics. If you've ever had a teaching observation, it's the same thing where I've been observed and I didn't realize I trend left, right? So people just have these weird things where you talk to an audience and you tend to favor one side over another, and it's good to see everybody, right? To engage with people in the back and the front. And for me, the job talk, the hardest part was honestly not the presentation, because that's where you get to present your own work and that's your bailiwick, it's your wheelhouse, right? The hard part is the Q&A, and that's the part I really dreaded, right? Because you sometimes get the really kind of, it's, that crazy guy in the department that raises his hand. And it's, even the department members will kind of go, oh dear, right? Like, John is raising his hand again. But you still have to respond to that in a welcoming way, in an inviting way. And the best place to practice that is at conferences where you're presenting your work or doing mock job talks. But for me now, when I go to job talks, I can tell who is going to succeed based on how they handle a Q&A, because the assumption is that your presentation should be excellent. But how you handle new things, curveballs, and we can use all sorts of sports metaphors, right? But that is really what demonstrates to me your expertise in the field and your willingness to work interdisciplinarily or to entertain new ideas. I mean, that's where you are exposed, but that's potentially also where you shine. So I've seen job talks saved by a Q&A where the presentation was but the Q&A was just great, right? So that's not a throwaway. And to speak to preparation, I've actually seen at Berkeley, I just thought, at Berkeley, you're really going to do this? But I saw a job talk where the guy had written his notes on the back of the hotel stationery. So it was clearly something that he had just jotted down the night before. And so, but it was awkward because they're about this big, the pages. So he was like shuffling through them to find, his next point. And it was awful, right? It's sort of a train wreck of a job talk. So you don't want to do that, but you also don't want to be over-prepared and completely rehearsed. So build in, if you're not a person that can ad-lib well, build in places where you feel comfortable doing it, say. So you do your presentation, and then, I'll be more informal here, make a joke, or do something. It makes you human. And I guess I have not gotten any, one of the questions was there sort of any questions that caught you off guard? But most of the time, I don't think they try to stump you. It's not a search committee's job to make you to look bad. But for a more teaching-intensive position, they might ask you questions about interpersonal conflict in the classroom, and that sometimes caught me off guard. So name a situation in which you had a conflict or a sort of differing point of view in the classroom, and how did you resolve that, right? So you can be prepared for that kind of thing. But mostly just be prepared to talk about your research in a really enthusiastic way, right? And to vary your tone of voice and not to talk in a monotone, and to just be interesting and engaging and speak to everyone in the room. So I'll just be quiet.
Great, thanks.
Invited me to come here and speak. I am very sensitive to this kind of environment here where we can get together and talk about academic job search. When I was a postdoc, I helped to form an office of postdoctoral training because at the university I was at, there was no kind of organization that Victoria and others here are leading. So I think this is just tremendous to help you succeed in your academic job search. So we've learned that most of you want to be an continue into academia, which I think is fantastic and notable. And I wanted to know how many people are in humanities here, or any?
I think I
a
only
couple.
saw one.
2.
Oh, okay.
And everyone else is in a STEM, considered a STEM field. Social. Okay, terrific. So we're sort of divided here and skewed into one side. So how many people are postdocs? Very few. And most, that means most are graduate students. Okay, all right. So I'm going to tell you about my experience on the job market, which happened last year. And it's hard to imagine because I feel like that was 50 years ago, even though I've been here 1 year. So I started August in 2013. And when I went on the job market, I applied for 90 positions, ranging from smaller teaching schools to Ivy League powerhouse research institutions. Of those 90, I conducted 10 job interviews at also a variety of places, from Ivy League down to smaller teaching institutions. I would say that this approach my thought there was to sort of shotgun, and this is the reason why. When I asked people how many people applied for these jobs that I ended up interviewing for, they were very kind to tell me that, yes, there was 800 applications for this job, there was 500 applications for this job, there was 200 applications for this job. And that was extremely powerful to hear, that there were so many people competing for so few positions. So I think that begs the idea of shotgun approach. That is, statistical sampling is what is needed here, applying for lots and lots of jobs, because there's so many people there and so many people are good, that the strategy I think I took ended up helping me to succeed, and that was more statistical. Now, getting a job was not because of statistical sampling. It was, a lot of things that need to be done to get the job. So what did I learn from the job search process? I learned a lot of things about myself, I would say, during that process. I learned a lot of things about other institutions, institutions that I did not have the privilege to be part of before, and sort of the broader sphere of academic science and how it kind of works from a whole bunch of different research level institutions. And I think that was extremely useful for me. I met lots and lots of new people, and these are my colleagues today. So as has been mentioned already, these kinds of interviews and the job market itself can earn you or allow you opportunities to meet new people and to interact in novel ways that you may not get the chance to do at being at one institution or even just going to meetings and whatnot. So I think that this was a very useful process, even though it was kind of rigorous going on that many job reviews. Just to give you an example, one time the interviews were, well, I should back up and say that the postdoc I came from to come here was mostly leading a research team doing field work and biodiversity kind of work. And so I was in the field during the interview process. I had all my clothes, and definitely dressing appropriately is very important. So I had my suit and tie, which may not have been the right thing to do, but I was sort of there to play business. I was ready to do business. So I was driving around all over the place in southeast United States, staying up all night long collecting data, and I have my suit ready to go. When I got the call, then I got to go to the airport and go, and then, So in one case, there were 3 interviews within 1 week, and I literally was coming off the plane to then go back on the plane, go back there, come back, go on the plane again, just back to back to back. Really, really intense. So I would say that when you're going on the academic job market, that you need to prepare mentally for this kind of intensity. And for me, it was really exciting. Like, I was getting paid to go on a plane and interview at some place. This is awesome, right? My whole career has been spent trying to learn something about these things that I just find inherently fascinating. And here now I'm getting paid to go on a plane to talk about this. It was just outstanding.
Enthusiasm.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
So maybe just kind of check that and just give some perspective that somebody's paying you to come and talk amongst the department. They're coming you to pay you to tell your story. I mean, what a privilege is that? So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Even all these kind of gloom scenarios that I'm telling you about, the competitiveness, and that I think is adequately described here by everyone. Don't let that get you down the road of despair. This is really amazing that, the whole thing that we're doing here. We get to answer questions about the world we live in. We get to engage deeply and intellectually about something. I think this is just the best job in the world, frankly, even despite these scenarios.
See, wouldn't you want to work with him?
Are there commonalities in the search committee? So I'm coming out of this from a geneticist perspective, and in genetics, the interview is kind of structured as follows. First, you come in, and somebody picks you up at the airport. You meet people. They usually take you to the hotel, and maybe there's a dinner that night that will be some people. And as has been mentioned, the interview starts as soon as you shake the first person's hand. It doesn't end until you're on the plane and going away. Every single second, consider it that you're being evaluated. That's something helpful to know. Just remember that there's no on and off here. It's 100%, 150%. This is what's going on. So then there's a dinner. And then the next morning, things will start early, usually. There's a breakfast, again, with some people in the department, different people usually. And then you'll be timed interviews where you'll go and meet people in the department. At some point during that day, there usually is a job talk, and that is where you'll give a job seminar that's related to your research topic. Then there can be a dinner and more meetings after the talk and dinner. And then the next day, there can be a chalk talk. And this varied between institutions, but I found the majority of places I interviewed had a chalk talk. So the chalk talk is basically you getting up there in front of a chalkboard, no PowerPoint, no slides, and usually what you should do is articulate your first grant proposal or the most exciting idea you want to put out there and that you're going to start the lab with. And so for about 10 to 15 minutes, you need to stand up there and articulate to a variety of people that are not experts in your field, what is your idea? What is the deep question you want to answer? Why is it important? And how you're going to go about getting $1 million to do it. And so standing right here, 10, 15 minutes, boom, 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 and then it's a whole committee of people, and those people will start asking you questions. And this is really an exciting thing. I really enjoyed the chalk talk because I got to hear how people were thinking about how I thought about a problem, if that makes any sense. And this was really instructive. So I think when talking to my colleagues and preparing for chalk talks, people said this is going to be really difficult. You need to really think about this. And it scared me. But I found the chalk talk to be really the most fun part. So I don't think that happens in all fields and disciplines, but that's something that's very common. I've been on a search committee since I've been here, and we had chalk talks for that. So I think that's something to keep in mind for STEM, is preparing the idea. And this goes to, I think, the biggest point. If you want to run a lab, if you want to go into academic science and do what our jobs are, and that is running a research lab, you need to think about what you're going to do. What do you want to answer? What is the thing that just you cannot stop thinking about? These are the things that are going to allow you to push through, I think, and keep you motivated to get others motivated about how things are going. And that comes across. Like, what do you want to do? That will be articulated in your job talk. That will be articulated in a chalk talk. That will be articulated in every conversation you might have with people. What are you going to do? Not what is your advisor going to do, but what are you going to do? So it's important to think about these things in terms of your research and the things that you're really excited about. What are you going to make a living out of that? What is going to be your research lab's focus, the research program? So that really comes out in the chalk talk, I think. Are there often asked questions that candidates can/should prepare for in advance? This really varied between the different institutions that I interviewed at. From more teaching-focused institutions, there was a lot of questions from people about teaching a classroom. What new ways are you going to teach? There's kind of new recommendations from the National Academy of Science and AAAS and now NIH to impart active learning styles in classrooms. And I think universities are starting to embrace this kind of idea where the classroom is flipped around. Instead of me talking like I'm doing now, pontificating away, it's you talking and students in the class talking to ask questions to then drive the sort of discussion of a topic. So this active learning approach is sort of a buzzword right now, but it's something that I think when people are asking what new ways are you going to teach the class, that they're looking for these kinds of innovative ideas for teaching, whatever it might be. So that's one that might be thought of. Now, at the more research institutions, there was no questions about teaching. It was a little bit striking, actually. It was all focused on research and what is the hot topic, what is the new thing that you're going to bring into the world, what is the excitement, how are you going to interact with me? It was another kind of question that seemed to pervade. People want to know how you're going to be as a colleague to work with, but also to do research with. If you think about it, your colleagues and coworkers you might spend more time with than your family at some level in terms of hours of the day. So people are wanting to know what kind of a family member you will be, so to speak. And that's kind of important to keep in mind. What advice would I give to my new applicant self? Oh, my. This is a hard one to answer. I would say that the approach I took as a shotgun approach, statistical sampling approach, is a good one. I would still do that today, I think. I think I was lucky during the time I went on the job market that there was an abundance of jobs. And that cycle sort of waxes and wanes. But, yeah, my new applicant self, that's a hard one for me to answer. So I'm not going to. How much do you think the job talk interview class impacted your candidacy? Absolutely, 100%. The job talk was a critical part of it. And the interview was a critical part of it. This really made it or break it. And, you know, I didn't get offers at all 10 places. There were places that I didn't get offers at. There were a lot of places I did get offers at. So I don't know if that means I blew the interview or that means there were superior candidates. I think one thing to keep in mind is that every place there's sort of a fit. There's an established culture at a place. There are research interests at a place. There are research strengths at a place. And chances are good that people want to keep those research interests and strengths strong. And that means usually trying to have colleagues that will help improve the research area that the university or the department is known for. So it is not to the detriment that if you go on an interview and you don't go there, when they're interviewing 5, 6 people, you know, it depends on the fit, and it may not be the best fit. So I wouldn't take it as a depressing thing or whatnot. Just keep in mind that just going an interview, getting these things is a great thing. And again, just remember getting paid to go on a plane to go somewhere to talk about your research. That's really awesome.
That's great.
Okay, thank you.